to the Art of Move podcast with myself, Anthony Manuel, and my good friend, Dr. William Braybar. We were out here in the Canadian Rockies having a great conversation with Tim Sheiff, and unfortunately, the first 10 minutes of the podcast did not record. We had a bit of a technical issue. The only thing that you really missed was an introduction about Tim, and Tim is a American Ninja Warrior champion. He is a parkour athlete. He is someone who has been exploring multiple different systems of functional fitness, and we wanted to talk to him about his journey. And currently he has founded the Way of the Rope Instagram page, a rope flow education platform, as well as the School of Biomechanics, which is his new education platform and training plan that he wants to share about his take on biomechanics and functional fitness. He has gone through so many different areas of exploration. And in the first 10 minutes, all that you really missed was him talking about how he discovered functional fitness by realizing that his gait mechanics were off when he wanted to run an obstacle race. So someone invited him to do an obstacle race, since he already had the upper body strength and the American Ninja Warrior stuff. He thought, hey, if I could run, then I'd be pretty good at this. And then he discovered all the inefficiencies, and it led him down the path of functional fitness. And where we started off was we were talking about his experiences doing functional patterns and what he basically learned from them. Sorry that we missed out on the first 10 minutes, but the rest of the podcast is gold, and we hope that you enjoy it.
Which nothing else led me to do it to that degree. So I got some good things there, but nothing. The thing with FP was nothing really stuck beyond around the time period I was doing it. Once I hadn't done it for 2 weeks, I'd be completely back to normal, and nothing really stuck. And I there's something with that I think there's certain hallmarks for me that just the way I work, other people can function differently. That and maybe, you know, I've not had the coach with the right session. I've not done it for long enough. I've not, you know, if Nowdy was to coach or something, it might be he might have developed it further now, whatever it is. But there's certain hallmarks that led me to just be content to move on. Although saying that, I actually did get banned from functional patterns, and that kind of led me to move on. But I'm kind of grateful to Nowdy for doing that anyway.
What caused them to quote ban you? I know there's like they're pretty strict, and they're pretty particular about, you know, who they let in and everything. And I'm not, you know, I don't want to get into that too much, but what do you think was the causative factor for that?
I was documenting my journey. I was doing something I called the formula, where I wanted to combine functional patterns with the carnivore diet, with microdosing mushrooms, with cold water therapy, and a few other things that I just thought, if because the carnivore diet helped me to really strip away all inflammation. The medicinal mushrooms helped me to tune into my body and to be able to activate muscles deeper than without them. It just there's something again to your nervous system or whatever it is that you can do on mushrooms that just access you a deeper range. And the cold water was great for recovery. So I wanted to try and just see, and I went to Bristol, and I was going to do 3 to 4 sessions a week with a coach over a 3-week period. So really wanted to get scientific and immersive in this practice, and just to see what I could do. Now he caught wind of it because he's got birdies everywhere whispering in, and I think he caught wind of it from a few of his birdies, and I got a message from the coach saying, hey, got a message from Nowdy, I can't coach you anymore. And the guy refunded me, and then I messaged with Nowdy like, hey dude, like what's the matter? And he kind of came at me there, and it was a blessing to be honest, because it did lead me to what else is out there, and it led me on to Weck method as the other end of the spectrum. But it's quite an interesting journey and experience to deal with Nowdy like that.
So with Weck, myself personally, I really like to move. I like to start doing it right away. And I first came upon you when you were in Joshua Tree with Weck. And I'm like, this is the most interesting thing I've ever seen. I want to know the deep, dark secrets of what you learned there. And because I know you were immersed in with Weck. What epiphanies did you come upon there?
Yeah, so that was the other end of the spectrum. Was, now he messaged me and said, if you ever come to Hawaii, I'm going to call the police on you and put a restraining order. And I was like, dude, I'm not trying to sneak up, but I'm not that bothered. But Weck was like, come over, and I went and did the the Weck method qualifications, and then I did that for 3 days, and I had a hotel for 3 days, but my flight was booked for 2 weeks apart from going in to going out, and I just was going to wing it. And I ended up staying with Weck for the rest of the trip. So I stayed with him for 10 more days. And and we ended up going on a trip to Joshua Tree, just me and David Weck, and it was the middle of the desert. We drove out there from San Diego, and he went deep on the Weck steps. We had a little smoke, and a couple times, not every day for me, but because that kind of stuff did help me. I don't do that anymore, but it's certainly, there's moments when I've used marijuana and it's helped me to feel things within my body and have understandings that are hard to access without it in my current frame of mind. I'm sure there are completely natural ways to access that, but it just helped me, give me those clues. And so just the Weck steps, standing on the Weck steps after a day of running around the desert and actually feeling my body relax on them was quite an epiphany moment that doesn't feel the same without the marijuana. And it was just amazing to tune in, whether it's the nervous system, whatever you tune into. The rope itself, man, the epiphany of what the rope can guide you to do, that it's this tool that puts you on this figure of eight path that is for efficient motion, and the way that the infinity is embedded in our DNA, embedded in a lot of God's designs within nature, that it's perpetual motion, it's momentum, it's not going end and then having to use muscle to start and go the other direction. It's curving the corners so that we can use that momentum. We use a little bit of muscle and activation to direct it and curve it around, and then we go again. And it's all of nature seems to move with this effective. And for me, when the rope guides you to that, I like to call it sort of living balance. So it helps you to move with constant balance, which then allows you to use less muscle and more tensegrity of the body, more of the bones, more of the tendons and the ligaments, more of the fascia to move. When you just look at tigers, and yes, they are muscly, but they're not, compared to the power output that they have, then they're nowhere near as jacked as the power output that they're able to do, because of this equation. That's one of the things Weck told me in Joshua Tree that stuck, was power equals strength over balance. Now, with it being over, the better balance is, the smaller the number. So the better you get balance, the smaller that number becomes, the more strength then can carry over to power. Most people just relate strength to power. How much can you deadlift, like squat? But that's because the balance isn't part of the equation when you're stood there on a lifting platform with your heels slightly raised in the squatting shoes. Of course, balance is just perfect at that point. So strength almost equals power. But as soon as you start to put strength through motion, and this is what moving with balance does, when you move on this infinity path, every bit of force that you put through your body that is not in balance has the potential to leak out. Every bit of force you put through your body when you are in perfect balance goes towards the end goal of getting to the finish line. So if I'm running from the start line to the finish line and I'm moving with balance, every step I take is efficient and the power is utilized for forward momentum. And on top of that, you've got the tensegrity working in your favor. Every step I take that's out of balance, I'm leaking energy. I'm wasting energy in the wrong direction. I'm not using the tensegrity of the body in the most maximum function that it's designed to do. And that's why someone like Usain Bolt runs to the finish line. Michael Johnson says he'd be faster if he kept his head in the middle and if he ran straight. And yet he's the fastest in the world. Maybe that's why he's the fastest in the world. And then you've got people like Joseph Famboulet. I don't know if people watch athletics, who's got a slow start compared to everyone else. And he comes through like a steam train. And if you watch the shoulders of him compared to the shoulders of other athletes, his shoulders are moving. Everyone else keeps their shoulders still. His shoulders are moving around so much more. He's moving a lot more internally. And this is catapulting him to have a lot more speed externally because he's using tensegrity more than everyone else.
Yeah, so is that
bit of a tangent, a rant, but yeah.
Is that what you call?
That's what it's about.
Is that what you call big cat training? That's the first I've heard of it from you first, and I love that saying. I've even feeling it within myself in the ropes. I'm like, okay, this is how a big cat moves. Is that what you mean by that?
Yeah, it is. I think there are certain abilities we have that are innate, or that we copy everyone around us, and everyone around us walks and moves. And this is what I like about GOTA, is they've identified certain athletes that move differently, that were the cream of the crop, and they have certain patterns of motion. And they have just sort of happened to have fallen into these patterns by luck or divine intervention, whatever it is. But the fact that all of nature already moved with these similar patterns, Oh yeah, with that. This is what I call it big cat training, because I think there is a mode of movement that humans can tap into, that most of us have to develop. Like the 0.0001% of Gota didn't have, they developed it naturally, but everyone else, we have to find organized ways to develop it. Now Gota have a system that they apply to get there. I think I'm not. There's certain things I agree with Gota, and I've done a recode and spent some time with that as well. I like Weck said, balance is king, strength is queen. And I ran with that. I've run with that. That's where I'm at right now. It's like, I've got that equation. I understand that equation. He's telling me balance is king, strength is queen. How about I just follow that hypothesis? Because truth, movement never lies. And this is why Weck says so many nuggets for me. Movement doesn't lie if you've got the eyes to see it. You know, if you've got the eyes to see it and understand it, movement doesn't lie. And when I met Weck and saw Weck move, this 50-year-old male with a replaced hip, and has got this history of dysfunctional feet and also back problems and his tricep thing, and yet he moves like that, and he moves organized and efficiently and balanced. When you can start to tune into what moving with balance looks like, he moves that way. I listened to this guy, and no one had ever applied martial arts principles to locomotion before, and yet this is the same body that can do fight, it can do flight. It's the same certain biomechanical commonalities between them, functional patterns, whether it's the overhand or the underhand for running is the overhand for fighting, and there's just so much there that he'd identified. But of course he speaks in riddles to most people, and because most people can't get past him looking like a 50-year-old man who doesn't look athletic to look at standing there, their own judgments get in the way of the potential nuggets of knowledge. And this is what I love about the way the world literally works, is knowledge is hidden. Like it can be hidden behind these riddles and these locked doors because of our own egos. What we're looking for in someone that's going to give us information, they have to have a white lab coat on or something, and then I would trust their information and come with these peer-reviewed studies. And it's like, you look at someone like Weck, and he's not trying to come with any of that, and it's on you to earn the gems that he's sharing.
And that was like a big aha moment for me, was, I loved his ideas, and I'm the type of person who looks for allegory and looks for those riddles, because I know that there's deeper wisdom hidden underneath the metaphor, right?
Yeah.
But when I actually saw him run and I actually saw him roll the rope, I was like, holy shit. Like this guy can fucking move.
Coordinated. When he moves both hands, they are in sync like no one else. Yeah.
Super, super impressive stuff. I want to touch on a point that you made, this idea of balance is king, strength is queen. And this is a discussion that we've had on a few episodes, is how you define strength. And I'd love to see how you define balance as well. But if those are the king and queen, how do you define what balance is? And then how do you define what strength is? Are they quantifiable measures, or are they a little bit of like a less tangible thing? How do you define them in your own practice?
That's a really good question, to be honest, because the thing is, when it comes to balance, there are several types, and this is what with School of Biomechanics, as I've built it, there's 3 main modules, and I start with static balance, and then we move on to living balance. And living balance is the patterns, is balance in motion, it's sequencing, it's timing, and static balance is, can you remain still when your environment, we use a lot of Swiss balls, the environment's trying to move you around, can you still remain still? And what I've found, I had incredible DOMs from doing balanced training. Like, it is still strength training, but it's not this opening and closing, flexing and extending strength training. I call it like lateral strength training. It's the stabilization of the muscle. It's kind of the fibers doing this rather than opening and closing. So it's still strength in its own right, but it's strength to remain balanced. As I've done Weck, I like to dig in. I've dug into Weck's past more than most of the people, I think, when I've spoken to him, because I know that success leaves clues, but with him, he moves on to the next thing and he'll forget what really got him there. And there's a thing I heard him say a few times, and I got to quiz him on it, and that's about the Swiss ball. He had a back issue and feet issues, and how the Swiss ball helped both of them out. And that was part of his discovery into balance. And so I went deep. I'm still going deep into the Swiss ball, but I'm like 3 or 4 months in now, doing it every day, literally. And it feels like it's kind of cementing my body back together from all this you know, if you try to apply power as you get older, as you get into your 30s and 40s, and you've got these niggles, and you feel more fragile and scared, especially, you know, with the diet changes and things like that, whatever's come about, I've begun to feel more fragile, and that's why I've had to stop doing some of the practices that I love. And this comes down, the way I see it, is down to stability. And if we're stuck in these patterns of motion that we've always done, and we don't allow ourselves to sort of vibrate and shake to hit the end ranges that we're missing within the muscle, and this is what the balance or stability training does, is we're missing a huge piece of the puzzle here. And when you look, I love to look to nature and the way we're designed, and we're children. Well, we get core stability first. We're on our backs, lifting our legs. We're on our front, trying to lift our heads. So we're getting this, you know, the posterior lift, and we're building our good strength this way. Then we learn to crawl. You know, you've got the contralateral going on. You learn to walk on your knees. You learn to stand. But children look really kind of goofy, and they're like unstable, but they're learning stability, and they're building that stability. They're building their balance. Then they learn patterns after they learn, because they learn to walk, they learn to jump. Then they might want to learn to throw when they're, you know, 5 or 6 years old. So they go through this stage of core stability, then a bit more, you know, from proximal to distal stability, and then they start to play with balance, and then they play with patterns. Children love a balance challenge. It's in their design. They love to, you see, you know, they want to pop on a wall and hold my hand, you know, let's walk across this wall. They love a balance challenge. They don't like lifting heavy weights. They might, you know, copy their dad if they see him, but by nature, they're not trying to lift heavy things. And we can't, you know, frankly, we can't, not even design to build muscle until we're 18, you know, maybe even 20, 25, till most of us can actually build muscle. So in nature, it's not even designed to do strength training till we're much older. And we're still trying to solve a lot of issues in the body with strength training. And it's like, well, hang on a minute, go back. And it was Paul Chek's work that actually put me onto sort of his approach to getting people to crawl with injuries, to go through their baby stages and see what they're missing. And he did a lot of stability ball work as well. And so you look at stability and balance are one of the first things we develop over many years in our childhood. And it's one of the things we go when we're older, and that causes old people to fall. And yet we just try to use strength to solve everything, or most things. And because we don't really know how to apply, because no one's leading the way with the balance training. You might stand on a Bosu ball or a, you know, soft train, or you might play a little bit on a Swiss ball. But how do you structure, you know, a session on it? How should it look? How is it sets and reps? Because that's another thing I don't really apply unless it's strength training. Is sets and reps. You don't really see that in nature. You know, you see tigers learn how to be tigers because they play with their dad, and their dad or their mum, and they know mostly the mum, I guess. Their mum knows the boundaries of how far to push them and let them push them. And there's a playful ebb and flow, a bit, you know, like kind of jujitsu maybe kind of thing going on that we learn through play. And play for me is one of the keys to mastery, not sets and reps and this medicinal, robotic, sterile approach to things that I think some of these other systems seem to take. And that's, you know, they get results and they help people get out of pain. That is great. That is what we want. I apply myself in a different avenue. I want to get, you know, faster results and more across the board if possible, and make it more open source that everyone can get this information if it works. So I'm running with what Weck's told me. I'm getting great results in myself. I've just launched School of Biomechanics, so I can help other people hopefully get similar results, and we can start to get some testimonials and share this with the world and put it out there. But I think there's a lot to be done with a Swiss ball, but we need that childish mind of play. You know, I put a timer on, but it's playing with a position rather than, and it's barely even like moving through, because that's one of the things I see Paul Chek do. And I'm sure he's got some, you know, there is some nuggets there, but it's still moving through flows from a position to a position. Whereas I will just hang out in one place and try and stay in that place for longer, try and find the shakes within my body where I feel like these muscles that are stuck between on and off are starting to learn how to switch on and off in that moment. And I mean, that's a whole other thing. But yeah, essentially I'm trying to look to nature and clues within that and the way things are designed, and apply it to a practice to get results that might offer another solution if other things aren't working for people.
So I've noticed you get into martial arts, or maybe you were into it before. Is that how you apply a lot of your balance, or what are you doing within the martial arts realm currently?
So I've never done martial arts. I just love the UFC, to be honest. And it's something I'm like kind of trying to grow out of, because I can see how a lot of the emotional traumas in a lot of the athletes that lead them to want to be fighters. And actually, it's kind of a loving thing. If we're trying to build a more loving society, it is a bit bread and circus and Spartan. And I see a lot of pain in these guys, and a desire to prove themselves that is probably not the most healthy. But as in terms of movement wise, it feels so fun. And because of the practice of the rope, and because of the balance training, you can feel like, from watching them, and then I can just feel positions in myself that just feel fun to express. And, you know, even with the kettlebell, or you might have seen me with the punch bag, again, something Weck did, where you have a punch bag at arm's length and you push it out there and you just try and hold it in the balanced position. And then you swap arms, and this teaches kind of bone stacking and all sorts of things that I don't see martial artists do. That, you know, I'm not a martial artist, so I can't say, hey, you should all do this. But when I do it, I feel like there's something to it, and it would be cool if other people tried it. But I'm hesitant to kind of throw my hat into that ring with martial arts, because I'm not sure that's the community that as much as a part of me that loves it, I'm not sure it's the healthiest part of me that loves it. That I kind of want to make my focus helping people understand and enjoy their body more, rather than make them better at competitions, and especially competitions that ruin other people's bodies, you know.
That's a very good point with that. And I'm trying to kind of get away from it myself. I appreciate the movement. I love watching the movement.
Yeah,
I
totally.
can see the pain in some of the guys, and like the amount of suffering they go through. I mean, some people lose 10 years of their life literally in a fight, right? It's that crazy. I'm trying to take the movements and make that something you can do every day in a loving way, almost like a spectrum from dance into martial arts, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Two ends of the spectrum. Yeah. Expression. I love expressing with the body.
Yeah. So I'm trying to promote more shadow boxing, just releasing energy during the day, let it flow through your body. It works really well with the ropes. And I can see you were doing a movement that had a lot to do with the ropes, where you were going from one side, turning to the other, and using the cardinal planes to switch sides. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. I actually have the same video that I made probably 3 months ago. So that really attests to Weck's like lines of intent of basically you can do the same things with the rope, the martial arts, and another person across the planet will end up doing the same thing, as long as you know the lines of intent.
The lines of intent is, well, it's so hard to explain it, because you have to, once you experience it, it's so beautiful, and yet to get someone to put the reps in and for them to find it is tough. And I guess that's the reward of it. Like, knowledge is earned. Like, drop the L. Knowledge is learned. Knowledge is earned. You know, real knowledge. It's not just studying in school. But there are these sort of, I call them matrix lines, like where there's these junctures where you can, I don't even know how to say, like you stack the body, and the rope leads you there because it puts your head over the foot and it tucks you in, and you find these balanced positions where you can choose to then, leap forward that way, or to change direction and face that way. And he does these cardinal calisthenics, which helps you kind of find and feel these matrix lines. But yeah, there's something in there's these junctions of positions which are balanced points, where you can choose like 2 or 3 options of movement from there. And that's how basketballers become so good, because they do this just naturally. That's how they can fake to go one way and go the other way, because they're operating on these cross junctions of matrix lines or lines of intent. And the rope leads you to feel and find them. And it is in exactly those moments where you're going underhand one way and then you change direction to overhand the other way, or you're going underhand one way and you stance change. You change which is your lead leg. And so you've got we call it sneak matrix, literally, because you can do double dragons and stance switch, or you can change directions and go to face the other way. And the rope helps you to find these positions, these balanced junctions that you can just choose which direction you want to change and go from. And these are within martial arts. This is how people like Max Holloway, I guess, up until this weekend when he met his match, are able to just outclass people like Aldo. They get people on the half beat. They get people when they're in between balance points. And so if you know balance yourself and you're slightly better at balance than the other person, you can catch them when they're off balance, because they're stuck in the mud at that point. And this is what running with your head in the middle is. It keeps you stuck in the mud when you move from foot to foot, like a tiger that crawls or a cat they can stop at any moment of that crawl and remain balanced, and they're not just going to suddenly keel over. And so it's the same, that we can tap into these same lines of intent and balance points when we can walk slowly and stop at any moment, and then keep the walk going and stop, and keep, or we can reverse out of it. You know, there are patterns there to be found. And what I love, this is why I love the rope so much, is it's a fun way to learn, you know, compared to some of the others. It gets your brain working. It just hits on so many levels. It's the left and the right side. It's the non-dominant training. It's such a special tool, and it's so simple and cheap and accessible. And I could teach one person in 15 minutes, and they could teach, you know, 20 people or people for the rest of their life of those 3 patterns that you can teach in 10, 15 minutes. So yeah, it's just been a really special tool for finding those points.
So one of the things that I kind of wanted to bring up in terms of progression with this style of training and movement practice, progression isn't something that we typically think of in a movement practice context. And like when I was practicing the Ido Portal method, I wasn't thinking in terms of progressive overload. But you can kind of internally quantify. It's like, okay, well, my movement feels better. I feel more integrated. I feel better. But when it comes to creating programs for other people and trying to organize the system in a particular way, is there a balance between that, like, you know, or maybe functional patterns would have had that sterility to it, that excessively clinical feel of, you know, you do this and this is the prescription, and you do that and you progress this way, and this is the result that you're going to get, and you're measuring it, versus here's the playful approach, it's free form, you're going into it. Is there a middle point for you where you can progressively overload a movement practice while maintaining that level of playfulness?
Yeah, that's such a great question, really, because I think about that as like Weck and Ido are 2 ends of the spectrum, literally. And I think it's not about finding a middle point; it's about doing both, and that's what Weck's MO is, right? Both sides utilized. We look at both sides of everything, whether it's both sides of the foot or both sides of the training, of the organized training, and then the sort of disorganized free flow training. I think that's why I've currently got 3 modules. I think I'm going to develop it to 4. Is that the Swiss ball training is the sort of chaotic training, where there's this ball that can, because it's a sphere, it can roll in any direction, and it will roll to your weak spots, because if you're strong somewhere, well, that's the wall. Where are you weak? Oh, I'm going to try and trip you up there. That's just the nature of it, right? So that's kind of disorganized, chaotic. You're putting yourself in a position. Another thing I love is you're just setting up the parameters, and the body does the work. Like, I listen to a podcast, I don't have to focus like on the task with my mind. The body's focused on the task. And so it's just doing this work. I can listen to a podcast and I can absorb everything that's being said, or I can watch TV and just sit on it, or kneel on it. And so that's kind of not clinical or anything, but the body it's enjoying itself, and it's solving riddles by itself. When it comes to the other end, for me, it's the sequencing, and that's very sort of external. Is that this ball is external to me, and the body's figuring that out. Then the patterns and the sequencing now is I have to focus on that. I have to use my mind to think about, you know, especially in the beginning, which direction I'm going, and it's very internally led. Like the Swiss ball leads that. Now we're going to so this is the other end of the spectrum of static balance. Now we're going to living balance. We're going to internal. We're going to have to be focused now. I can't just listen to a podcast and throw these kettlebells around and do this. I mean, you can kind of listen to music when you rope flow, but there's a certain level of focus and intent. And so it's about hitting both ends. And then you can do the middle training for me, which is the sort of landmine kind of training hits me in the middle, because it's not the figure of 8, which is the full pattern. We're maybe focused on this, the outside edge of, you know, we're doing this. We're focused on a part of the pattern, but not the whole pattern now. And so we can break down into these different things. It's kind of still a big puzzle to be solved, but yeah, hopefully there's some nuggets within that help people.
Yeah, definitely. I kind of wanted to bring it back to strength, and I noticed that you worked with Julian from Strong Fit, and I saw you doing some flobility, and I noticed that both have concepts of torque, internal and external. I want to know the secrets there. How do you play with those variables? Is it a lot like Weck where you're opening up and, closing, or what are you doing there to gain strength from internal, external torque?
Yeah, I mean, that's something I've not gone super deep into yet. And I see that Chris Chamberlain, who you had on, and I actually that's the next podcast I'm going to listen to, is the chat with him, because he's obviously been the closest man to Weck. So I think he's got a lot to share. He talks about the internal and external as well. It's about maximizing the capacity and the end ranges of the body and the muscles. Because if we look at the arm as just this hinge elbow, and we just treat it like that, we're missing so much potential there. And actually, when the wrist rotates this way, and we see that the muscles wrap around the body like a rope, we're wringing out this rope, and we're getting the maximum tension, so there's no slack left in the system. And then we rotate back, and it's this rotation effect, which, I mean, even boxers, they snap like that, right? Because they're using the maximum range. That is, if they tried to just hinge out and in, it's not going to be very fun. So it's just applying these principles to strength training when we're lifting something is all about finding letting the body where it wants to find tension, and also just thinking a little bit consciously about how we can apply torque. It becomes intuitive eventually, I think, but in the beginning, because we're just mimicking what everyone else has kind of done and taught us, I think we're missing a lot of points. But I mean, even in bench pressing, right, they say try to snap the bar. Like, there's certain cues, I think, bending that help us to tap into torque that are there, but it's just trying to how we can apply this in more strength training. And I do think there's something with strong fit, with strongman, because this is where my views would differ on functional patterns views, is they completely kind of disregard all strength training. So it seems even strongman training, and there's just something about carrying a big sandbag or something. Maybe the views of, I'm not sure where they are right now, but carrying a foot heavy piece of equipment, which isn't just a skinny bar that's unnatural, but it's like using your whole body to arch your whole back to lift it up. That just calls on all of the muscle fibers in the body and every cell has to operate like with the same agreeable intention of like, yeah, we're going to do this. Like, we're all going to get involved with this to make this happen. That makes you feel strong. And that's what Julian is on the strongman training. And then he's applying the torque principles of rotation, within the joints and the muscles, to then get that extra, 2 or 3 or 5% out of what they're doing.
That's the best explanation I've ever heard, to be honest, on that.
It's hard to do, but
it is for sure. What about flowbility? Did you find when you did that it was the same concept? Or what were you trying to achieve there?
I did. Is that because when we do this, we do? Yeah. So they don't really explain it as torque. I think they're just trying to open the back of the rib cage as much as possible and get the scapula out of the way. And they're coming at it from a different angle, but they're aware that it's the same body, the same physiology, that this is how we do it. Whereas if you stay here, the scapula kind of stays in the way of the ribs at the back. And when you rotate, it just kind of opens it up. It was so fascinating that flowbility are the opposite of functional patterns in terms they do no rotational training. And yet they get results because what they're doing is decompressing the spine. And as you get this sort of bilateral opening and the spine lengthens up in the decompression, well, the longer the spine is, the more it's able to rotate. So they talk about getting rotation as a byproduct of just focusing purely bilaterally, which I was like, here's functional patterns focused purely rotationally, or like mostly rotationally. And now these guys are doing bilateral, which it's just amazing to witness how it's kind of arrogance and being sure of ourselves leads to blind spots. And this is where Weck's both sides utilized just as a principle that just rings true everywhere, because it is both sides utilized. Like flowbility, they do the anterior pelvic tilt and then the ribs back. Now, functional patterns I think they do they do to pelvis under and the ribs forward. Go to do anterior pelvic tilt and the ribs forward and the chest forward. And then you've got gymnastics, which is the hips under and the ribs back. So you've got all four ends of the combinations of ribs and hip positions. And it's like, how about they're all true? And how about we get strong in all positions? Like,
I think that, okay, so what you just said is really interesting, because that opens up a debate, not a debate, but a conversation that's been ongoing in this podcast specifically, and maybe in the community as well, which is, why not get strong in all positions? Yes, but also, right? Is there a correct way to move? If there is a correct way to move, it would assume the most biomechanical efficiency as it relates to particular patterns. So yes, get strong in those positions as it pertains to, like, for example, the gymnastics position of the hips back, ribs back, like, do that for gymnastics. For gait, what is the optimal relationship to the ribs and hips? Is there actually an optimal way to move, or a correct way to move? This is the there I kind of see there's two camps. It's like, it has to be this way, or there is no such thing as correct movement and you should be prepared for anything, right? So the movement optimist or the biomechanics purist, and that's the spectrum, right? On that spectrum, where do you think you're finding yourself lately?
Yeah, that is such a good question, and it's the easy answer is going to be, well, it depends what your goals is, right? Like, is it locomotion or is it backflips? And for me, I love locomotion because it was my weakness, and I think if you do get better at locomotion, it's like I see it's kind of sharpening the axe. If you have 2 hours to cut down a tree, you spend the first hour and 50 sharpening the axe. And that's what my last few years has been about, is like, I can still do the flips, but how fresh do I feel going into them? Is my practice making me feel more secure in my body so that I can do them more frequently? Or am I feeling no better I'm feeling no confident and less fragile when I feel like doing them? And that's how I know something's been changing with me lately, is because I've been able to do flips again because my body's said I'm not too fragile to do them anymore. And that's, honestly, I can put that down to the Swiss ball training, which I'm doing. And what I think, and this is why I think we can be too intellectual with our approach to training, and where some of the systems are still so similar, even though they think they're so different, is that they're all trying to be too intellectual and overanalyze and use the brain and willpower to make it happen, rather than just set up clever parameters for the body to figure itself out. And that's what I think the Swiss ball does. When I talk about it, it seeks and finds your weaknesses, and then it works the weaknesses within. It's like kind of like like a ghost pen or something. When someone's written a ghost pen and you draw a scratch card or something, you go over that. You're going over the body when you put yourself in certain positions with the Swiss ball, and you're getting these shakes. It's hitting both end ranges to strengthen what it's meant to be strong in, and just to give us that, what's innately our potential, our animal. I say animal movement, but it's obviously human. But we have this animal body that can move, like I said, the big cat. And what I love about it is I'm just setting up parameters for the body to figure itself out, and it will hit end ranges of everything, and whatever's left is what I'm meant to have, rather than this approach of, when I say get strong everywhere, I'm not trying to, bench like this and bench like this and bench like this, and and just actually, applying, trying to get strong everywhere, and spending 10 hours in the gym every day trying to hit every muscle in every position. That sounds boring as F to me. But I'm just finding that there are these balance games that seem to be working for now, that Weck went through. He's done his, and he calls it a rite of passage with the rope and with the ball. And I love that. It's so cool, because strength training, that runs out. That has an expiry date that's within a month or two of the last time you did a session, right? But the rope, that stays with you. The stability ball, that stuff stays with you. It takes till you're 60, 70, 80 till your balance starts to go. So if you can do a month, 2, 3, or even a year on it as an adult, well, that might last you 10 or 20 years of time, as opposed to strength training, which runs out, which is, why functional patterns, a week or two later, I was feeling none of the benefits anymore, because it's still so focused on trying to replicate and activate muscle, rather than whether it's fascia that's going on, or lateral strength training within the muscle when it's finding balance. There's just something different with these practices that have much more longevity, and I think that there's just, those for me are clues that we're operating within the right goals here for biomechanical practices.
I think that
Although
concept,
it's far from what most people are currently doing right now, but it's just, yeah.
well, because you got to think of what people are doing right now is based on a lot of conditioning and just what socially everyone knows. This idea of creating the right context for your body to self-organize, to adapt, is something that, well, first of all, I've never heard anyone just frame it that way. And that was like a moment for me, like a mind-blowing moment.
I'm glad you get it, bro, because I don't know when I say that sometimes. I don't know if people truly understand what that means, but it's great. You're with it.
Well, I guess that is what weight training is too. Is you're making your body self-organized to produce force to go through a certain range of motion and whatnot. But if you're like you said, you're creating these novel scenarios for your body to organize itself to deal with this stressor or deal with this balance challenge. It's a challenge, but you're trusting your body to self-organize and to neurologically adapt to that new self-organization. That's what it kind of sounds like. And obviously there's structural adaptations that happen as well. That's really, really an interesting frame to do a movement practice with. Will, do you have that kind of mentality? Any questions about that? Any takes on that?
Yeah, like just off the top of my head, going to the gym, like I could strengthen everything and I would spend all day in the gym. So I want to go as fast as possible. I don't even go to the gym, to be honest. I do everything outside and I move, okay, and I rope and I do all that stuff and I mountain run. Basically, I want to get the most out of the Swiss ball in the shortest period of time. What movement am I doing? And keep in mind, for myself personally, and I want this to be a selfish question, I can already stand on the ball. So what would I do to progress my balance there?
Yeah, that's a great question, which I'm sure many people may have now. So I've kind of developed, that's what I've done with School of Biomechanics, is develop the progressions. But if you can already stand on the ball, how long do you stand on it for a certain amount of time, or you just can stand on it?
I can stand on it for minutes.
Minutes. So I love kneeling on it, right? Because there's just something about the knees that give us access to the hips and help us to activate the glutes. Like children walk on their knees before they walk on their feet, and when we're on our feet, you've got the ankle and the knee both getting involved with issues along the way, and we want to really focus core first and then build out. And so I love just kneeling on it, and you can just watch TV and just get 10 minutes kneeling on it, and then you can play with, are your knees opened out, or are your knees narrow, or are they together? And then you can do, in Gota they do the rockers, or kind of do these. I like to do these hinges, or you can roll into Seiza and then push back out of Seiza and roll into Seiza. You know what Seiza is? Where you're like you're kind of closed and then you push out. So I do a little bit of motion with that, but I'll do like maybe 5 minutes static kneeling with the hips straight, like extended, and then I'll do like 5 minutes rocking, and then I'll go stand on it for maybe 10 minutes, and I might spend the first 5 minutes just hanging like in a forward fold and keep the feet quite narrow, and then you can play here with the, again, like feet in position, and this might hit the inside of the thighs, and I'll get shakes on the inside of the thighs, or you can play with the feet wider, or you want to start with them wider to begin with for the balance, but when you get better you can get narrower. And so I'll do normally 10 minutes kneeling, 10 minutes standing. And normally by the end of the 10 minutes standing, I feel what's so beautiful about the standing for that kind of period of time is you can strength train. This is the only way I've ever found to strength train this properly, right? So we talk about tripod foot, which I know some people fucking go to hate. Chongji is kind of like, the middle of the foot. Anyway, you want to build an arch in the foot. You want to drive the ball of the big toe down, right? If you stand on a Swiss ball, well, it puts you into this Weck step position, and you can actively drive in with the ball of the foot. So this is helping to actually strength train the way I'm seeing it now. We're strength training the arch in the best way I've actually ever seen. Is you're in a balanced position. You can push into an object that's malleable. You're gripping it with this compressive strength. Both feet are talking to each other in the same way that with the rope, both arms are talking to each other, because if they're not, you're going to fall. If I move left with my left foot, or my right foot has to act. If I push in with the left foot, well, the right foot has to react and give me some space here. So the feet are in communication with each other, not just through the hips, but there's a complete circuit there. So with the standing, you're able to train this arch position. And by the end of 10 minutes, I sometimes have to step off at 9 minutes or something, because the fatigue in my feet is very real. And so it's a very real form of strength training for the feet, and one of the best ways I've found. Then you also want to do some of the baby positions. So you'll do prone, and you'll lie on your belly, and you'll lift up. And in the beginning, you'll have to have your fingertips down, and you might not be able to do 2 or 5 seconds. But by the end, you can do 2 or 3 minutes, like an aeroplane, strengthening all these muscles that help to support the spine and pull the spine and the neck. You're lifting the neck up, looking up, pulling up. You can activate your glutes to lift the legs up as well. So you're getting this prone. Babies spend a lot of their time on their belly, lifting their head up. That's a real strength that we lose. That's a natural resting position that we would, we'd read on our elbows, or if we didn't have the sofas and things we would be lying on the floor a lot more. And when you're a child, how much you watch TV on your elbows, you play video games on your elbows, lifting your spine up. But we don't do this. It's a natural way to get in this posture helping strength position, rather than just doing rows and stuff all the time. It's just a natural way to get in. So you've got the prone position, then you've also got supine. So you can, don't know how far my headphones are going to go. Like I do sitting. You can just sit on it, and you can, the other day I did maybe 15, 20 minutes watching the UFC, and I was burnt out. My whole core was burnt out. I didn't know I could get that tired from sitting, but you just have to, occupy yourself with something, put a timer on and go for it. And then you slowly work down from sitting till you can lie. And this takes some practice. In the beginning, it might be 5 seconds, and then eventually you build up so you can do 1 or 2 minutes, and you're lying. And what this is doing is activating the TVA, the transverse abdominis, which is they talk about in functional patterns, they talk about in flobility. But you're like this cat that's kind of loose on its back, never stationary. If you lie on the floor like that, well, that's boring and not really activating much. What we're engaging, all those little micro movements are just doing so much more, and it's softening the body. It's releasing the stiffness, because this is what happens. A lot of the muscles that we have when we get injuries and niggles is they're stuck between on and off. They don't know what to do. They're in freeze mode. And as we're doing these things, we're in the beginning, your reflexes will like shoot out, and you'll make these big, massive movements. And eventually those movements will soften to these little micro movements as the muscles learn the intricacies of what each one does and how it should control each limb for the task that it's asked to do. And so there's the belly, there's the lying, there's the back. And then I start to do some one-arm plank stuff where I'm on my kneecaps and I'm planking, and and for the shoulder, it's incredible, because then the shoulder's shaking and I'm getting all this lat shake and this core shake, rather than just planks on the floor, which anyone can do. We've got the stability task as well. And so anyway, we get into it in School of Biomechanics and I progress it slowly, but there are just certain positions of just put a timer on and go for it.
That's very interesting. One thing you said there, I was balancing on a tree the other day. There's a tree falling over, rocks, and I'm trying to balance on it, and it's an old tree, so it's bouncing like this as I'm doing it. And I used to have to go like this, but I found that now that I'm doing all these things where I've softened up, I can actually flow like this as I'm balancing, and that's my balance point, instead of having to teeter my body, right? So I'm letting
you've learned to relax, and you've learned the soft movements. Yeah.
It's something that I've never felt before, but you just showed it there and kind of gave the explanation for it.
Yeah, you see, like slackline, if people have been on a slackline, how much does it shake sideways in the beginning when they're trying to walk across? This is kind of a 2D version, or people walking on a pole, right? But with the Swiss ball, because it's 360, it can go in any direction. It's incredible for that. And someone did question me on Instagram the other day. They said, it's not a natural object. You can just go out in nature and get as much benefits. And I was like, I know the point, because I understand that it isn't a natural object, but what it is, it's elastic, right? Where is elastic in nature? Well, it's within our bodies. Like that is within, it's only in animals and humans, right? It's the only form of elastic. What an incredible invention. This is elastic. This skin can last for 60 years before 50 years before it will start to slowly, but you get a rubber band and it won't last more than 2 years maybe, and it will snap. So we can't create elastic like nature's created elastic, but it is something to strive towards, right? So with what I think that is happening here is the elastic object is educating our muscles and our fascia, or whatever it is, ligaments, become stiff, we put them in we soften the ground around us, and so they don't have to be as elastic anymore, right? They can become stiff because everything else is soft. What I think it's doing is the elastic of the ball or whatever, whether it's a resistance band and it starts to shake when you're pushing it, is educating the elastic of our body. Like when you want to start a car, the battery's dead, you get a battery and you attach it and you poof, and it teaches the battery to be alive again. And, you know, it's kind of a layman's example, but if you get the point, is this elastic knows how to be elastic, and the body's going, oh, is that what I can do? I'll figure it out eventually, and it learns to soften and be elastic again, and that's what I think is happening.
That's an interesting take too, because one of the things that I'm cautious of in using exogenous tools to create specific qualities in my body. For example, you think of a person with an orthotic that has arch support. You're not actively building the arch because you outsourced it to something else.
Yeah.
I think of the same thing with like the toe spacers that some people are using. Like I had a friend who used toe spacers and he slept with them every night and he ended up with nerve damage in his feet because he wasn't like actually building the strength to create the toe splay.
Yeah.
But that scenario of where your body has to dynamically react to an elastic force, because there's the strength element in it as well. You're not outsourcing elasticity. Maybe, you know, like I remember some people would criticize gymnasts for using the springy floors because they don't develop the natural springs in themselves, right? They outsource their springiness, this exogenous thing. But because I think maybe you're dynamically balancing in real time, that elasticity could probably, I can see that being an exception to the rule of outsourcing the quality to something else.
Well, it's both sides utilized. So I would say walk barefoot, like go out for hikes barefoot and do that training. And it's just two ends of the spectrum there, you know. So yeah, I'm not saying it itself will fix you and you can go out and walk out and you're suddenly, you know, completely invincible and bulletproof. But it will give you a great a foundation to cross train with some, which I love doing, barefoot hiking. Like I do it often. And I just think that two sides of the spectrum is the hard and the very soft, and it's what goes on in between.
Well, and that's you really added a lot of deeper understanding for the both sides utilize principle, because when I first heard David talking about it, I kind of visualized it from like a body perspective. It's like, okay, you can do bilateral and unilateral, and you want to make sure you're using both sides of the foot. And you know, I thought it was just purely in terms of you know, actual aspects of the physical body. And maybe that's how he was talking about it at first, but even the concept of like, yeah, it's like do the structured training and the unstructured training. You know, put yourself in a training scenario and also put yourself in a lot of scenarios where you're actually utilizing the qualities in the environment that you would want to be using the qualities. That like adds a lot of depth to that principle. And
even Ido said, right, Ido was like train the sides of, like, do awkward positions. I don't know if you remember him teaching that, like jump on the sides of your feet so it's an awkward position, so that you're not like 10% of the time train these bad positions, you know. And that he's kind of similarly on that theory.
Mm-hmm. Do you do any awkward position or like suboptimal quote unquote position training in your own thing, or do you kind of just rely on your body to self-organize in that way?
Not in kind of maybe the conventional Ido way, but I definitely experiment with the ball, and I would encourage other people to do with sort of, you know, like piriformis stretches. So it's, you know, when you've like folded over your leg, you know, trying to open up the back of the hip. So just weird positions like that where I will test a position. And because the ball is forgiving, it's not like the floor, which is just gonna, your body just locks up. Like it allows you a bit of room so the body can kind of find its mobility range, and then it just kind of wiggles around in that mobility range, and then it can maybe find more. So I don't purposely like spend loads of time trying to train awkward positions, but I like to experiment in an unstable position with a forgiving environment on stability challenges to see if there's stuff to shake there that can you know, stabilize.
Start to chill out.
Yeah.
So in the last, let's say in the last year, is there any Is there anything you've been working on that you haven't really come out with yet that you want to share on the show? Something, an internal cue that you're like, oh, that's it, or something along those lines.
I'd say there's one thing that I've been doing recently that I've put on my Instagram, but not many people have copied it yet. But even just one girl copied it today and said that she felt how powerful it was, and that is I call it kind of eye of the tiger, but it's the infinity. I don't know if you saw me with the rope doing the step ups. So you can take it like a step up. So you're doing underhand, and every step you kind of move the head over the foot, and you follow the pattern of the rope, but with a step up. This is in like the first week of School of Biomechanics, just so people get a feel for what this does. And you can take a kettlebell and put it into your sternum, and you have a step in front of you, and you put the kettlebell, you position yourself over that step, and you just take a step up, and the shoulders are at this angle, as opposed to like when people step up on something square, they use a lot of muscle to stand up. But when you start to apply the figure of eight pattern to a step up and the head over foot principle, and you take a step up, you feel how much more effortless and efficient that step is, and how many more you could do. The kettlebell helps you to highlight it. It also helps you to have to find the balance point, because you've got more weight. It's just a highlighter. It's a greater expression of what's there. You put it over the center of your body. You have to go over the foot, and you step up. And just if people do, a few minutes of that, and just feel then like the spinal engine afterwards, it just activates, it awakens this pattern that is dormant in us. And until you feel it, like you felt it a bit with the rope, but when you put a kettlebell in your chest and start doing step ups, right, with the underhand pattern, there's just something that happens. And that would be the one pattern I would say for people to try, is to kettlebells are there, boom, step up. And yeah, it's on my Instagram, it's on my YouTube as well, Tim's Gym 2022 or something. It's in that, but that would be the one nugget of takeaway for people to try to feel the spinal engine on another level.
That I'm going to go to the gym today and I'm going to try it.
Yeah. And that's in module 2 of the School of Biomechanics, because I do static balance, then that's living balance, and there's a bit more strength. So yeah, it'd be great if you could try it, man.
Let's talk about, for people who are listening and who want to dive more into your work, you just launched the School of Biomechanics. What can people expect when you're going through it? What is it all about, and who is it for?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a bit of a bold claim to be called the School of Biomechanics, because I know there's a lot of different systems, but I thought, why not, share my take on it. I think I've got value to bring to the community. Just give it a go. And so, like I said, there's 3 modules at the moment. Each module builds on the last. So the first module, each module lasts a month. I think they should last 3 months really, but I don't want people to get bored, and I don't want to seem like I'm just trying to get people to sign up for 9 months long. I want everyone to get the experience, and then they can teach people how to fish, hopefully, and they can go and do it themselves. But the first module is balance, as we talked about with the Swiss ball. We develop it up to be able to, certain goals I want people to reach by the end of the month, a certain length of time standing, certain length of time sitting, lying on the back and stuff. And then we move into living balance. So we've worked the controlling case, we're doing living balance, which is a lot of rope, well, a little bit of rope flow, but a lot of light kettlebell, and the weight can develop over the month, and some landmine stuff as well, because we're working the infinity pattern. We're doing head over foot training. We're going to do some crawling as well. Crawling is a pattern. It's a lot of sequencing. And then in module 3, which I may add a 4th module with fascia, because I do think there's a lot of value to Chongji's work with the way he develops fascia with the toe curls. I've done some stuff with my fingers that's really helped my upper body. Animals claw, they scratch trees and stuff. And we think that they're just maybe sharpening their nails. I think they're developing fascia now, like from what I've experienced with this. And you see a lot of Chongji's is the toe curls on the towel, right? Like if you've done that for like 2 or 3 months, you do experience how it does develop. Something goes on in the legs that happens. So I've spent my time doing that. So I may put a fascia module in for a month, but or for those who have access to a gym, it'll be a strength module, and there's going to be some kind of strongman training within that. And then I really like Doug McGuff's work. Are you familiar with Dr. Doug McGuff?
Just minute amount.
So his approach to strength training, he's got a book called Body by Science,
Oh yeah,
and
yeah. Mm-hmm.
it's assisted machines. So you go to the gym, and these are the machines that I used to, turn my nose up at, and like, why are you using the assisted machine? Like that Ido Portal mindset, we should be training balance and strength. And it's like, no, that's the other end of the spectrum. When we do strength training, let's take the most balance out of it. Let's put the machine on train tracks, and then we can focus solely on muscle activation and intensity. And that there's something to his training where you do slow reps, you do 10 seconds in each direction on an assisted machine, and then you focus on doing it for as long as you can. And you should choose a weight that you fail at around 90 seconds to 2 minutes on. And you get strong quick, and you only have to do one session a week. The session lasts about 20 minutes. What happens when you do those slow repetitions is you don't skip a single fiber of muscle. If you push, right, and you've got that accelerated force and the explosion out of the gate, whatever, you skip a whole load of fibers there. You explode at the start and then you skip a load of fibers. When you go slowly, well, every inch of that, every millimeter of that has to be done by the muscles at that range of motion to take you through the motion. So when I've done that training, which is the other end of the spectrum to the balance training, it's made me feel strong. Like I say, you do 20, 30 minutes once a week, and you can make incredible progress with that and not have to overthink it. You just do a push-pull horizontal, push-pull vertical, and then you do like a squat and some sort of hinge if you can do like a lower back hinge. And it's quite simple. So that's one end of the strength training, which I get into there. And then the other end is kind of strongman sandbag carries or farmers walks, kind of simple stuff that just the whole weight is trying to ground you to the ground, and everything has to like fight to keep you upright. And I think there's something to the strongman training, which Chris Chamberlain is a real incredible, proponent of that. There's just no one in the world I've seen swinging the kettlebells weights that he kind of swings, and lifting the sandbags for the size that he is as well, with like 500-pound deadlifts and stuff. He's really an inspiration. And so I think when it comes to strength training, I'm not claiming to be an expert at it. I just think I have some good understanding and theories that I want people to try. School of Biomechanics right now is experiential. I'm doing it at a discounted rate. When I do fully launch it, I want it to have, I just want people in there right now that are down to experiment and try this stuff with me and give me honest feedback. And so there is 3 modules. Like I say, we get into the strength. That's an interesting chapter, which when we come to it, and then there's potentially the fascia as well. And then, of course, there's a whole other world which most biomechanists miss, which is the emotions, and how, emotions stored in the body. The issues are in the tissues. Like, I've discovered that so much with some of my stuff. That's a whole podcast for another time. But, man, I've had cries and injuries have lifted after the cry. Like, it's incredible how that works. And that's something that we do need to talk about among us, and that's something that I talk about in the thing. Is like, just trying to solve everything physically isn't going to fix it. Like, and I'm sure many people have experienced that, where they've done everything they deem to be right to fix an injury and it's not gone, and they start to subtly aware that there's probably some emotional thing going on here that the universe is trying to teach me, that maybe I need to let go of this or whatever it is. But yeah, I'm going to cover a little bit of the emotional side of it as well, though I'm not an expert on it, but I think that needs to be addressed by all biomechanists too.
Well, I think it's interesting because obviously in circles of, well, maybe not obviously, if you've never done yoga and you're not part of a yoga community, I was really heavily invested in Ashtanga yoga for several years, and was part of
one, yeah.
And I still live my life by yogic philosophical principles. But in yoga, it's pretty much accepted universally that, hey, you might cry, like you might be in the middle of a practice and something might crack open, or the whole idea is that you're working these things out of your body. And a person will do a back bend or a heart opener, and all of a sudden all this emotion comes out, and it's this big release, and then you feel like a different person, right? And some people will get stuck in a pose, and then they have this big emotional release, and all of a sudden they can access it like the next time they're in the studio. I think it should be a big part of the conversation, because it, like you said, the issues are in the tissues. The body is the mind. the, you know, and our mind and emotions, everything that we are, like, people think about like nervous system patterning for the body, and for movement, but like your nervous system is impacted by all of your personal experiences, all your emotional experiences. That is nervous system conditioning as well. So if you don't, you know, release that or let that go, you're not going to have some of those deeper level changes happen either. So I think that's, I love that you brought that up. I love that you're planning on exploring that on a deeper level, because that's something that's been, you know, more quietly. It's interesting because I don't share that part of my practice a lot, but that has been a big part of my movement practice, has been a lot of emotional work as it relates to movement, and even seeing how, you know, different things that you process will affect your posture. There's like a whole theory. There's a great book called Eastern Body, Western Mind that talks about how the chakra system relates to Jungian psychology, and they have this whole theory about how different psychological profiles will affect different like versions of your posture, and how you cope with the world and the stresses of the world based on reading people's postures. Very, very fascinating.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. And if someone's, you can try and correct someone's, you know, geek neck or whatever, but if their emotion doesn't change, if their, you know, self-worth doesn't change, it's not really having any deep beneficial effect, and it probably won't last, to be honest. I call it soul mechanics. I think the emotional work is soul mechanics, and the way I see in the hierarchy is soul trumps everything, like it dominates all. So if we work at the emotions at the soul level, that's the stuff I've been doing the last few years. It's been the most beneficial to me, more than the biomechanical stuff. It's kind of fun and frivolous and my passion, but actually, you know, everything that's good that's ever happened to us was because of love, right? And everything that's bad that happened was because of lack of love in some way. And yet many of these practices don't talk about it. I mean, I even heard Naudi on your podcast the other day say, you know, if someone's worried, they'll hold a certain posture and you have to try and get them out of that worried stage. And so they'll acknowledge it in small ways, but I don't think they quite value how profound and powerful that is. And because it's such a hard task to do, to actually guide someone into the emotion, because the emotions we're avoiding and the ones we're avoiding feeling, we've built up everything in our life to avoid feeling certain emotions, and all sorts of protections and addictions to cover them up, and resistance and distractions and all sorts. So it's the toughest nut to crack, you know. And I think there is some of the Jungian stuff about the shadow, that there's certain truths to it, or half truths, and he's circling the nest, but I don't think he's quite fully on the money. But there's definitely, there is a huge discussion with all of these systems that completely neglect emotions and try to solve everything physically. And there's just a whole spiritual world that exists, like you say, with the chakras. I mean, even the meridian system is like laughed upon when I share some of that stuff by some Western people. And it's like, and yet it feels so much closer to the truth when I'm looking at, you know, the liver line, and you look at the traditional Chinese medicine, how liver issues manifest in the nails and kidneys and the ears, and there's certain connections that I've had in my life when I look at issues, and the emotion of liver is anger. And because I think a lot of us, especially in this biomechanical world, have a lot of the same emotional injuries. There's a lot of probably father issues. There's a lot of arrogance. There's a lot of messiah complexes within this community, and I'm probably as guilty as anyone of you know, easily falling into that kind of trap. And trying to work through that. It's funny how we've all kind of ended up in the same niche area, but there's so much emotions at play in how each system is promoting their system in the way they choose to do it, and it's interesting to observe from that perspective. And this is where I do think, you know, I don't want to keep talking about him, but now that he talked about functionality is everything that matters, and beauty and artistic, and that is completely frivolous and misses the point. But here's the thing in nature is this is the masculine and the feminine. Everything in nature that is designed in my eyes by God, or whoever's designed, however it's come to be, is a perfect balance of function and beauty. And this is how it is. You look at a tiger and tell me that's not beautiful. Like, you look at the forest, and until man comes in and has imprint on things, of course, but dolphins and all sorts, there's an equal balance. And here's the thing, now he even acknowledged it, because he talked about recognizing triangles and diamonds in body when they were aligned, and you can intuitively feel, and he gets it, but then he doesn't want to intellectually get it, because everything has to be functional. And so there is a harmony here between beauty and functionality. And I think we're so masculine, left-brained in the biomechanical community that we're missing half of the picture, and that there is, there is lesson to be learned from something like yoga or Pilates, which may be more female-dominated, but we're missing some female input into this movement, and we're missing that there's beauty to be sought that will give us answers that we may be missing.
Yeah, I agree. There's definitely a lack of even wanting to go to that side. And in the alternative biomechanics field, you already have to have like an alternative mindset. You've probably gone through some shit with the mainstream, the way you're thinking compared to them. And there's your trauma right there, right? Like I've experienced this myself, even in the small period of time that I've been in this world, right? So I can imagine someone like Nody is just taking shit constantly. And that's a lot of negativity to be put upon somebody, and you will store that trauma. And
well, I think actually, if we can dig into that, because I'd love to. Yeah. It is the law of attraction. It's happened. It's in all of our childhoods. Normally, from conception to 7 years old, there's emotions which our parents shutting us down emotionally. So we've stored these emotions from childhood. So the law of attraction, it's not just this positive think of money and you get it. It's way, way more precise and deeper and scientific than that. And so just to give my story from my childhood, my father only really expressed, I felt love from him, actually felt love from him when I was successful, either academically or within sports. So this is something I came to realize in the last year. My desire to achieve in sports and be competitive and win, this is Jungian or whatever you want to call it, is to get love from my dad, because that's how I associate love from the masculine. Was I had to earn it rather than it be unconditional. Not many of us, if any of us, have had unconditional love throughout our childhood from our parents. So what is playing out when Nowdy is getting attacked by loads of people online? When I was getting attacked from the vegan community, that was my mother issue. Now, when I'm trying to be achieve within the biomechanical world, I have to really check myself that I'm not just trying to earn respect of males because I want my dad to love me. Like this is where it comes from. So there's a lot of laws of attraction at play. Like you say, we're getting these moments which might give us trauma. I actually think we've got the trauma and they're trying to help us identify it to release it. But if we're not humble to the emotion that it's trying to awaken us to, then we never make progress, and the issue continues to be smacked in our face, and it has to be louder and louder, unfortunately, until we get a cancer, until we get, and you can use Chinese medicine to identify. If it's the liver, then it's probably suppressed anger or too much anger, or if it's kidney, then you've got suppressed fear or something like that. But fundamentally, it all comes back to emotions, and often it's childhood stuff. Sorry, that was a tangent on your point, but I hope you don't mind me digging into it.
I love that. And I do. It's funny because that infinity spiral kind of shows up again, even in your emotional experience, right? Where you're experiencing the same stuff over and over and over again until you break that pattern, or you break that loop. It will loop on itself, and it'll manifest in different expressions of the same challenges or those same suppressed energies. Because I'm with you again. Not very public in what I talk about in terms of the law of attraction, but that's been my experience as well. It's not a positive mindset thing. It's the sum total of your entire energy, including the things you've stored in your nervous system, including all of the subconscious beliefs. It's more subconscious than you doing a gratitude journal, but it's kind of like whatever your life is, it's going to teach you what's inside of you, right? So that's
soul mechanics. Like it's scientific, but you have to really study it in the right places and then but you can recognize it.
It's funny that you say that, because you kind of think you're escaping it sometimes. Personally, I was in the bodybuilding, powerlifting world, and I was strong and ripped for my size. So I'd always get praise from the guys. It would be the guys that would praise me. Whoa, look, you've got this, you got this. That kept me going, right? And I can see that within that community. When I quit bodybuilding, powerlifting, CrossFit, I lost probably 40 pounds, and everyone's like, you look skinny, you look skinny, you look skinny. That was a really tough point where I could have just broke down right there and just went right back to it, gained the respect again of the males, and that's that, right? But then I moved into the biomechanics community thinking I'm solving all these issues, and maybe the issues are still there. It's just at a deeper and higher level. I don't know, right? So that's very interesting with what you said there.
there's always a blend of, but there is some pure loving intentions, but then there probably is some, desire to avoid emotions of that are inside for all of us. Yeah.
Well, Tim, if people want to find more out about the School of Biomechanics, what's the best place for them to find that?
So I'd say schoolofbiomechanics.com it currently forwards to email sign up. So I'd actually say just email me right now. Yeah, just email me. I am at humantimothy.com. Oh no, .co.uk. Yeah, I am at humantimothy.co.uk. Or just find me on Instagram and drop me a direct message. That's fine. I reply to everyone there. So it's currently Tim's Gym, but if you search Tim Sheiff, it will come up. But Tim's Gym with 2 S's. But I'm still trying to figure out my branding, to be honest. But yeah, it's Tim's Gym on Instagram, or find me Tim Sheiff, or email me I am at humantimothy.co.uk.
Amazing. Well, dude, thank you so much for having this nuanced conversation with us. I felt like my mind was really genuinely expanded by this. I hope everyone who's been listening so far has felt the same. I know that I'm walking away with a lot of insight. I literally ordered a Swiss ball on Amazon while we were talking.
Yeah.
And I'm very, very grateful that we had this conversation. If you guys are listening on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button. Leave a comment with what you thought was enlightening for you. And if you are listening on Spotify or iTunes, leaving us a rating and review helps our visibility. You can follow me at The Body Moves on Instagram. You can follow Will at The Art of Move. Follow Tim at Tim's Gym, 2 S's. And we'll catch you on the next episode of the Art of Move podcast. Thanks again, guys.
Have a good one, guys.
Thank you, Anthony and Will, and thanks everyone listening. Appreciate you.